This is World History 2, Chapter 23, Segment 5. Napoleon Rules Fans continued. Other things that Napoleon did was to set up lycées. Lycées are government-run public schools. He did this to educate the population of France. On top of that, he needed officials in his government to help make the government run more efficiently and smoothly. Tax collectors, people in the Census Bureau, people in the banking industry, things like that. For these jobs, people needed to be able to read, write, and do some form of accounting. So he set up these lycées to train these people. And what makes them so great is that they were open to the public, so not just the wealthy upper classes, but now individuals who were peasants before could send their children to school where they could receive a good education and can then get a good high-paying job in government. The next thing that he did was set up the Concordat. This recognizes the church as separate and not involved in national affairs. So the church was no longer under the control of the state, which was good. That made the peasants happy. That's what they've been asking for since the Revolution. And it did, however, make Catholicism the #1 religion in France. So almost like a state-sponsored religion, which made the Pope very happy. And then one of the biggest things that Napoleon did was set up the Napoleonic Codes. This was one uniform set of laws. Before this, there were different rules for different areas. It wasn't uniform across the country. So if you went from Bordeaux to Normandy, the customs, traditions, rules, and laws might be different there. This made it so that everyone in France was under one set of laws. The other great thing about the Napoleonic Codes is that wherever Napoleon conquered, he also brought the Napoleonic Codes with him. Some of the other things they guaranteed were individual rights like freedom of speech, freedom of the press. However, it did allow for slavery in French colonies. So when Napoleon begins to conquer Central Europe, many of the people there don't like being conquered. However, they do like the Napoleonic Codes because they do allow for freedoms that they've never had before. And after Napoleon's long dead, his codes lived on and become the basis for French and many other Europeans' criminal systems that they use today. Napoleon crowned as emperor. So Napoleon had already made himself co-consul, and then he had already been voted as first consul. However, he wasn't satisfied. He wanted to become emperor. He wanted to make France New Rome. If it was going to be New Rome and be an empire, then you needed an emperor. So in 1804, he holds a mock election and is supported by the voters who elect to make him emperor. It's a mock election because the voters didn't have much choice. Yes, they voted for it, but there was no alternative. So then, on December 2nd, 1804, while being dressed in purple, he took the crown from the Pope. Now, why is this significant? Well, the way coronations generally went in Europe at this time is that the Pope would be there, Mass would be conducted, and then after that, whoever the king or emperor, whoever is being crowned, would then walk up, kneel in front of the Pope, and be crowned. By taking the crown from the Pope and placing it on his own head, he was showing that he was above not only the Pope, but the Church. Then, after that, Napoleon then crowns his wife, once again signifying him as head of the family and above his wife. Napoleon had a grand vision of an empire. He wanted to control Europe and North America. To do that, one of the first things that he had to do was reconquer part of his lands in America. In 1789, St. Dominique, which is an island in the Caribbean, one of the individuals there, Toussaint L'Ouverture, we'll talk about in subsequent chapters, led a slave revolt and overthrew the French there and declared the island free, hearkening to some of the same cries as the people during the French Revolution, which was happening at the time. Napoleon wanted to take the colony back. It was a very profitable enterprise. If he could take it back, he could make more money. There was fierce fighting on the island, however. Number one, the slaves do not want to be slaves anymore. They've had a taste of freedom. They've had a taste of governing themselves, and they liked it. They did not want to go back to being oppressed and being slaves. On top of that, the French soldiers are not used to fighting in the Caribbean. It's hot, it's humid, very difficult, it's very swampy terrain, and malaria is present. And Europeans traditionally don't do well in areas with malaria. At this point, there's no treatment or cure for malaria, so oftentimes getting malaria meant that you would end up dying. And if you didn't, you would be knocked out of the fight for weeks, months at a time while you were recovering. So disease devastated Napoleon's army on the island. Here we see a painting. This is taking place just after Napoleon has crowned himself emperor, and you see him crowning his wife Josephine. Notice some of the differences here from what had been said. In this painting, Napoleon is wearing red. We said he was wearing purple in lecture. The reason that he's wearing purple is traditionally the color of royalty. So that's why he wore purple. Why the author chose to use red for this one is unknown. But here we also see the popes and bishops in the church, and you see Josephine's ladies in waiting. The Louisiana Territory sold. So after things do not go so well on the island of Saint Dominique, Napoleon needed money. He had lots of money to finance his wars. He had already fought in Saint Dominique and not done well. To get there, obviously, across the Atlantic Ocean. He also was going through lots of battles in Europe itself. So he needed money. He needed $15 million for his military campaigns that he was doing. He wanted to also rival England. His goal was to conquer Europe. He wanted to take the Austrian Netherlands, parts of Italy, and he had already set up a puppet government in Switzerland. As Napoleon takes these territories, the rest of the European powers decide to try and curb or check his power. The main ones that will band together to form the Allies are Great Britain, Russia, Austria, and Sweden. So you have 4 countries ganging up on little tiny France. But Napoleon uses his tactical genius to defeat all of them. One of his largest victories, and probably his most brilliant, was the Battle of Austerlitz in 1805. At the end of the battle, Napoleon had captured 120 artillery pieces, 20 generals, and 30,000 Allied soldiers, a resounding victory for France. At this battle, Napoleon was outnumbered, but he was able to trick the King of Russia, the Tsar of Russia at the time, into attacking his weak flank. He purposely left his right flank of his army weak so that the Russians would attack him. When the Russians attack, all that weak flank had to do was hold out, because Napoleon's reserves were laying in wait, and they sprung a pincer trap on him and completely devastated the army, encircling them on both sides. After this battle, the rulers of Austria, Russia, and Prussia were forced to sign peace treaties. By this point, Napoleon had the largest European empire that had existed since Rome. The only thing that stopped Napoleon from conquering the rest of Europe was England's navy. England at this time has the best navy and will have the best navy up until World War I. If Napoleon could defeat England's navy, and if they could hold the English Channel long enough, then Napoleon could even invade Great Britain itself. And if he could get his troops on British soil, they would be successful on land. Here we have a picture from the end of the Battle of Austerlitz. A little bit difficult to see, but over here you see the French forces, and then you see the Russian forces, and the rest of the Allies being forced to surrender. Now, the man surrendering here is not the Tsar of Russia. Once the battle started going sour, he left. He did not want to be there at the end, and he did not want to have to surrender to Napoleon. Here we see a schematic for the battle itself. Here you see, Alexander I's armies. He was the Tsar of Russia. He outnumbers Napoleon's force. Not exactly 2-1, but definitely has a numerical advantage. What Napoleon did is he purposely left this side of his formation strong. Notice you got the 2 bars, and if you count up the troops, there are more troops here. And there's a reason for that. He leaves this side weak. Alexander noticed that this side was weak, so he thought if he could bring his troops here, that he could encircle Napoleon. However, by attacking the right flank down here, he exposed his own right flank, which allowed for these French troops to come crashing down almost like a pair of scissors on top of Alexander's and the Prussians' army. The Battle of Trafalgar. This happened off the southwest coast of Spain. This was between the French fleet and and English ships. In charge of the British forces was Admiral Horatio Nelson, who had already defeated Napoleon's navy during the Egyptian campaign. So he's a seasoned admiral, and he had already done battle against Napoleon, so he knew what to do to win. Horatio Nelson won again. It was a resounding victory for Great Britain, and it completely destroyed the French fleet. By destroying the French fleet, this would ensure that England would have the dominant navy for the next 100 years. Its main thing that it did is it did not allow for Napoleon to invade Great Britain. They did not have the necessary ships to hold the English Channel, to block the British ships, to hold the channel long enough for transports to go across and then invade Great Britain. So this ensured that no matter what happened, Great Britain would remain free and independent. And here is a painting of the Battle of Trafalgar. You see the giant ships, which you're probably very well familiar with. They'd be very similar to the ships that you would see in any of the Johnny Depp Pirates of the Caribbean movie. Larger ships, big sails, cannons on either side. They sail up, fire at each other until one is put out of commission or is sunk. Here is another picture from the Battle of Trafalgar. What happened is the British here have their fleet in basically 2 columns. The French here believe that they're going to stop the British ships and force them to go peel one direction or the other, and when they do that, they'll be fired on. What happened is that the British poked a hole right through the middle and began blasting the French ships, and then just kept repeating that same thing, staying in their 2-column formation, which is why they were incredibly successful.